So here we are, August 14th, 2024. Why does that date matter? Joe Bird, Remax Advantage Realty, Pool Professional Team. So today is the day that the changes from the NAR settlement get implemented in Maryland. The actual settlement date is August 17th, but Maryland has implemented as of August 14th through the Brain MLS. What changed? Well, in Maryland, no longer effective today can the seller and listing brokers offer of compensation to compensate the agent that brings the buyer, also known as the buyer brokerage, on the MLS. So traditionally the practice had been when a seller hired a listing agent to sell a property, they agreed to a total percentage, and they further agreed that a portion of that would get offered to compensate the agent that brought the buyer. And that was a unilateral offer of compensation to all brokers in the state of Maryland that was listed in the MLS. Per the NAR settlement, that is no longer allowed to be listed in the MLS. So sellers are not prohibited from paying the buyer broker, but it can no longer be done through the MLS. So what does that mean for you, the buyer? Well, prior to that, any type of property you wanted to see, one of the first things I would do is check what was being offered. And if that didn't match the agreement that we had of what my compensation was, you were notified right away. So you never got surprised. You never were blindsided by if you had to cover some of my commission. It was always before you even saw the property, certainly before you wrote an offer. Well, now we need to communicate directly with all those agents. That may be easier said than done. Agents are not necessarily notorious for being very responsive. So there may be cases where we are going to look at a house where we don't know yet what they're offering, if anything. And there's going to be many sellers that are not offering anything. In fact, sort of the leading comment that I've heard is that sellers are going to say, I'm willing to pay a buyer broker, but I'm not putting a number out there. I'm not putting a percentage out there. Write it in your offer. And that's actually what the DOJ wants. The DOJ wants us to negotiate that. So as a buyer, you're negotiating the fee from your seller. Irregardless of who pays it, you're negotiating that fee. And then you can negotiate the seller to pay it if you want to, or if you can't pay it, you can negotiate for the seller to pay it. So that's where we're at. That's the big change in Maryland. It's always been required that you sign a buyer broker agreement. Well, let me say always, since like 2016 or 2018, I can't remember the exact year, but Maryland required buyer broker agreements prior to showing a property. That hasn't changed. Probably more in force now, but hasn't changed. So if you are a buyer and you are working with a real estate agent, you are going to look at a house. If you have not signed a buyer broker agreement with the agent showing you the property, they inherently work for the seller. So when an agent says, hey, we got to sign this in order to move forward with anything, it's Maryland law. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And if they don't do it, you probably shouldn't trust them because they're breaking the law. But in Maryland, the big change is where the offer of compensation can be listed. And again, the increased likelihood that the seller is not going to cover it. We don't know all the changes that are or how it's all going to go into effect. But I tell you what, I guarantee I'm on top of it, and I will make the revisions with you. Take care.